What's up, basketball fans? Welcome to the Rats Report. It is time to talk about the Toronto Raptors, who drafted Ja'Kobe Walter with the 19th pick in the 2024 NBA draft. I'm going to be discussing Ja'Kobe Walter's game, what his potential could be with the Toronto Raptors. I'm also going to be discussing how this could impact Gary Trent Jr.'s future with the Toronto Raptors. And towards the end of the video, guys, the Raptors do have the #1 overall pick in day 2 in the second round of the NBA draft. I'm going to be talking about who they could potentially discuss very briefly at the end of the video. So stay tuned for that. So if you're ready to watch, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you wish to hit the subscribe button as well, that would be very much appreciated. So with that being said, let's get into today's video. So who is Ja'Kobe Walter? Well, let's talk about it and let's get you guys a little bit familiar with what he can do, what his game is going to be like, and where I see him with the Raptors. Now, he's listed at 6'4". He weighs 197.6 pounds. He has a wingspan of 6'10", which is absolutely massive for someone like Ja'Kobe. Having a height of only 6'4" and having a wingspan of 6'10" is amazing. He's 19 years old. He won't be 20 until training camp starts in September, and he plays the guard position. He averaged 14.5 points last season, 4.4 rebounds, 1.4 assists, and didn't shoot the ball really well from the field. Only 37.6% from the field. He averaged 10.9 attempts per game, made about 4.1, and his three-point shot may not look that great, but believe me when I say this, he's a much better shooter than his numbers indicate. He shot 34.1% from the field. He made about 2.1, attempted 6.3. His free throws, he had 79.2% of them. 5.2 attempts per game, 4.1 he made out of those attempts, and then he averaged about 1.1 steal and 0.2 blocks. Now you're looking at his stats and thinking he's listed at 6'4", and I want to clarify those are without shoes. So with shoes he's listed about 6'5". You're looking at his percentages and asking why does he shoot so poorly from the field? It's simply because he takes a ton of threes. I mean, more than half of his field goals are three-point attempts. And just given how he's shooting threes, the majority of his game is either shooting threes or attacking the basket. He doesn't really have a mid-range game there. Now, in terms of what he can do for the Toronto Raptors, I will say he's a spectacular, absolutely spectacular off-ball player, which is great for someone like Scotty Barnes. The Raptors drafted Grady Dick, and now they have Ja'Kobe Walter, great three-point shooter. And again, don't let the percentages fool you. He's quite the three-point shooter. He's a great catch-and-shoot three-point shooter, and he finishes, I believe, close to 71, 72% of his shots at the rim, but there are some concerns about him, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But overall, he's going to be someone that can come in, shoot a lot of twos, shoot a lot of threes. He doesn't have exactly a mid-range game, but most of his twos do come at the basket as well. But in terms of his potential, like I said, he's only 19 or 20 years old. By the time next season starts, he will be 20. So he's still got a lot of potential. He just seems like an extremely hard worker. And the fact that he has a 6'10" wingspan just adds on to the fact that I'm not going to sit here and say he's a great defender by any means, but he definitely has the potential to be a good defender one day. Now, let's talk about some of his strengths. Now, as I talked about, don't go off of the percentages. He is a great three-point shooter. So one thing you'll notice with Ja'Kobe when you watch some of his highlights is that he moves well off the ball, but he's an excellent catch-and-shoot three-point shooter, which is something the Raptors clearly need, right? Even forget about Scotty Barnes. I mean, they're obviously clearly building the roster around him, but just overall, that roster doesn't have a ton of shooting. RJ Barrett can't shoot threes. Scotty improved, but he's not ever going to shoot 7-8 threes a game and hit about 40%. You need someone that can shoot threes around him. And now you have Grady Dick already there, but now you got Ja'Kobe Walter, really good three-point shooter to surround him with. And of course, we got Jakob Poeltl temporarily. He's not a great three-point shooter either. Ja'Kobe also has really good positioning when taking shots. Oftentimes what you see with a lot of young players is they try to get a little bit too fancy. They do fadeaways. They try to do little different things when they're taking shots, and especially catch and shoot. He positions his body really well. You'll see that he has the same position every time he shoots a three. He has his feet set. He has the body mechanics down, and it just a player example I really like to use is someone like a Klay Thompson. When you watch how he shoots threes, he has his body set. He's ready to catch. He's got his feet set, and he's that motion of shooting threes that Ja'Kobe does so well. In terms of some of his other strengths as well, he doesn't shy away from physicality. Now, one thing he does really well is attack the basket. Despite his size, he's only weighs around 197 pounds. He obviously will need to get a lot stronger, but we'll touch upon that in just a minute. But he doesn't shy away from physicality. Despite his size, he does not hesitate to drive into bigger guys. and attack the basket, which is great to see because this also goes into when another one of his strengths, which we're about to talk about here. And that is that he goes to the free throw line a lot. I mean, someone who's 6'4", you don't expect him to average 5 free throws a game. So the fact that he does that again, it kind of goes back with, him being able to attack the guys and just he doesn't mind getting physical, which is always nice to see because a lot of younger players really shy away from that. But I do want you guys to remember a few of the strengths I talked about because we are going to talk about his weaknesses. And some of the weaknesses may collide with some of his strengths, which is why he shoots so poorly from the field. Now, one thing Ja'Kobe clearly needs to do, again, he's only 19. I want to remind people he does need to put on a lot more muscle. That being said is, I mean, 6'4" guys, you normally want them to weigh a little bit more than 197 pounds. But despite that, again, he just seems like he has a good determination to really attack the basket. But that's where some of the weaknesses come to, right? So obviously he needs to get much stronger, especially at the NBA level. It's one thing to do it against college players. It's going to be another attacking big grown men in the NBA that, obviously are 30, 35, 27 years old, really grown men. And he's going to have to really get a lot stronger at the NBA level. Now, I talked about how he doesn't shy away from physicality. One of his weaknesses, he does need to finish stronger at the rim. Now, this sounds like I'm kind of contradicting myself. The reason I say this is also ties in with his next weakness as well, which is that he just does not, he takes very wild shots at the rim. That is one thing that I do not personally like about Ja'Kobe is that he really needs to add on muscle. And it really, when you look at some of the weaknesses and you put them together, it all makes sense because he needs to put on a lot more muscle, needs to finish stronger at the rim, and he shoots wild shots at the rim. Now, the reason he does that is because he doesn't have the strength yet to attack the basket. He's also not a great athlete either, I do want to say. So it becomes really challenging. Like he's not going to come in and soar for massive dunks. So he has to get really creative when he does attack the basket. And sometimes he tries to, you obviously try to attack bigger players and kind of get fancy around the rim to finish some of the baskets, which makes it a little bit difficult for someone like Ja'Kobe. And the last weakness I really want to talk about is he needs to really develop a mid-range game. Now, the reason I say this is he's a great three-point shooter, but the only difference between, shooting threes and it's like that gray area. Like if you can shoot threes, you definitely need to develop a mid-range game because if you're not doing that, as soon as you decide to dribble the ball, opposing teams know you're going to attack the basket because you don't have a mid-range game. So for him, I think that will be the big thing he really, really needs to improve on in the NBA because you're going to need that mid-range game as well, just besides threes. If threes aren't falling, you got to be able to do other things. And if you're already struggling to really attack the basket, you definitely need to develop that mid-range game. And I do want to say one thing, guys. I did say he shot about 70%, 72% at the rim. It is also on very limited attempts, I believe about 25 attempts per game. So again, that's Ja'Kobe Walter. We do have to talk about some of the other things as well. Where do I see his floor, his ceiling, and what his future will be with the Toronto Raptors? Now, what is his floor? I think when you look at someone like Ja'Kobe, he's probably going to come in average 6, 7, 8 points in his first season. And I wouldn't surprise me if he averages more. I think he's going to struggle a little bit. The reason is similarly to why Grady struggled. It's just he's going to struggle with physicality. The three-point line is much further than the college three-point line as well. So that is one thing to take into consideration. I think his floor right now, he's going to struggle a bit. He will find his shot as the season goes along. It would not surprise me if he has a burst of game where he comes out and scores 15, 16, 17 points a game. But in terms of his ceiling, he seems like a player that is really, really hard. He works really hard, and you can tell he puts in the work. But he is definitely going to need to develop. Excuse me, as I said, a really strong mid-range game, especially if he's already struggling at attacking the basket against bigger guys at college level. He's definitely going to struggle in the NBA doing that as well. Now, in terms of his team fit, this is going to be very fascinating. I'll talk about this in just a moment because I do want to talk about Gary Trent's future with the Toronto Raptors as well. But let's just go into potential. When you talk about someone like a Ja'Kobe Walter, I think his future could be, starting shooting guard with the Toronto Raptors, probably average anywhere from 15, 17 points a game. Excellent three-point shooter, but again, it will need to be a lot of the things we talked about in terms of his weaknesses, it is going to be obviously a process of him getting there over the years. He's very young. He's only 19. He'll be 20 by the time the season starts. He's going to have to put in a lot of work to become a much stronger shooter. But there's also other areas of his game I think he could improve. He's got the potential to be a good passer. Maybe if he develops his dribble game a little bit more, he can become a better shot creator, I think. So those are just some of the things I think he could do. He'll probably be a fourth level starter on the Toronto Raptors. And again, it's funny we're about to talk about Gary Trent Jr. because I do see a lot of similarities between their game. Just when Jacoby's attacking the basket, he has this little pump fake he likes to use, and then he baits the defender to jump up, and then he'll get that foul call. In terms of his team fit, this is where it gets tricky because if Gary Trent Jr. is leaving the Toronto Raptors, if the Raptors aren't re-signing him, it's most likely that Grady Dick will be sliding into the shooting guard position in the starting lineup. That's where Jacoby is going to be playing a shooting guard position off of the bench. But if they re-sign Gary Trent Jr., I think that's where you have Jacoby and Grady kind of coming off the bench, which is absolutely amazing regardless of what happens with Gary, because now you got Kelly Olynyk, you got Jacoby, you got Grady Dick there as well. You got three guys that can really shoot the ball, and that'd be absolutely impressive. But again, I do want to talk about Gary Trent Jr. because they play a similar position, similar size, and you could even argue in some ways their games are similar in terms of their strengths and weaknesses. But this becomes really tricky now because if the Raptors were to bring back Gary Trent Jr., now how does the bench look all of this? So I'm not saying you should play Jacoby 25 minutes a game or 30 minutes a game, but you do want to give him some minutes as well. But the Raptors also have Ochai Agbaji, who they wanted to develop. So having Jacoby, Grady Dick, and Ochai off the bench, you've got to kind of figure out because none of them are point guards. So you can't have Jacoby at the 2, Grady at the 3, and Ochai at the 4. It doesn't fit. Grady isn't a great defender. He can't play the 3 position. Grady and Jacoby both are kind of at the 2 spot as well. So we'll have to figure out what the Raptors do with Gary Trent. I think this could be a huge signal as to maybe the Raptors are ready to move on from Gary Trent Jr. Now, in terms of the 31st pick, I do want to say one thing, guys, because the Raptors have some really interesting names that are still on the board. They got Tyler Smith. They still got Nikola Jurcic. They got Tyler Kolek as well. And there's some other guys like Bobby Klintman. There's another one player specifically I am missing, and I can't remember the name on top of my head, but they got some really good options, and they still have Bruce Brown as well. So could they possibly dangle the 31st and Bruce Brown for a future first? Who knows? Let's see. The Raptors will have some option. First, if you ask me, I really like Nikola Jurcic. He's a forward, and if you can get him to come into the Raptors system, he's someone that can really handle the ball. As I talked about in my last video, and I quickly want to touch upon this, someone that can handle the ball and distribute well. And now that you got Grady and Jacoby, again, potentially playing off the bench, we don't know what's going to happen with Gary. You got shooters all around him, and he attacks the basket, right? So that'll be a really nice fit. I absolutely understand where people will talk about Tyler Smith as well. And Kyle Filipowski is the name I was forgetting, but could the Raptors draft him at the 31st position? Let's be honest, he was projected to go somewhere in the late first round. It wouldn't be a bad pickup. The only question is now, if you were to draft Kyle Filipowski, now you have him and Kelly Olynyk, 2 guys that are center power forward that can't play defense. So where does the defense come from? It'll be a lot of question marks if the Raptors were to draft him. I wouldn't be against it. I think there are some other guys they could absolutely look at. But let me know your thoughts on Jacoby. What do you think of this? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And that will be it for today's video. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you guys have yourselves a great day.